so cool.
¿Se escucha? Can you listen? Yeah.
Bueno, buenos días a todas y a todos. Vamos a comenzar.
Good morning, everyone. We're going to start this plenary session on research on Gestalt therapy. My name is Marta. I'm the coordinator of the research commission of the Spanish Association of Gestalt Therapy, and I'm delighted to be here, very well accompanied, to speak about a topic that moves us all right now.
I'd like to introduce you, first of all. I'll introduce the speakers, the members of this round table, because we wanted to have a space big enough to have a dialogue, to share and think together about how to keep research in Gestalt therapy moving forward. First, we will hear what they have to say, and then we will have that space. I have Christine Stillens to my right-hand side. She's a Gestalt psychotherapist, a trainer, a supervisor since many years ago. She's been collaborating with a number of different schools in Gestalt training throughout the whole of the European continent. She has quite a long-standing track record. She's been the editor of the British Gestalt Journal for the last 17 years. This is one of the leading journals, greatly contributing to research and dissemination of knowledge about Gestalt. She's also a member of the research committee of the European Association of Gestalt Therapists, but she's here today basically on behalf of the International Society for the Advancement of Gestalt Therapy. She is the liaison in that organization with Europe. Welcome, Christine. I'll now introduce Pablo Herrera, who comes from Chile. He is a psychologist, Gestalt psychotherapist, holds a PhD in psychology. He is a lecturer and a researcher in Gestalt, the author of numerous studies so far. His main research interests include the following: Gestalt therapy and bipolarity, anxiety, resistance to change. He's also led a number of different research lines at the University of Santiago in Chile. Welcome, Pablo. And next we have Rosanna Biasi, who is currently the coordinator of the research commission of the European Society for Gestalt Therapy. She holds a degree in psychology, clinical psychology and community psychology, with an advanced diploma in Gestalt psychotherapy. She's the former chairwoman of the Italian Society of Gestalt Therapy, and as I say, is currently the chair of the Research Commission of the European Association. She also practices privately and is a trainer in Gestalt at the HCC Gestalt Institute in Italy. So we'll start with Pablo. Welcome, by the way. So we'll first start with Pablo, then we'll hear what Christine has to say, and finally Rosanna. Hello, good afternoon. I hope you can hear me okay. The first topic I wanted to get into is why should we do research in the first place? Otherwise, we will not make sense out of it. So there's something I want to tell you. When I studied psychology, what bothered me most was research. My idea of research was people with lab coats working with mice in a lab. And that was my belief until I came, and the first opportunity to do research came along when I was doing my master's degree. I didn't know what topic to focus on. And I wondered, what is happening to me at this time? What problem do I have? What do I need right now? And I realized that there was something happening to me in my professional training. I read things from Pearl, from Erickson, from great masters. And the books made it look very simple, and yet the interventions looked much more complex. They weren't working for me. So I thought, perhaps I need something that gives me a guide about the mistakes we made trying to emulate these great masters. And I realized there was very little on that topic. So I decided to focus on researching on mistakes when doing research, especially for newbies like myself. And I enjoyed research because it made sense for me. In my research for my PhD, again, I thought about what topic to choose. There was something very important in my life at that time. My grandmother, with whom I used to live, my mum, my dad, they all had chronic diseases. And they had significant difficulties in adhering to their treatments. And I would struggle with them, trying to make them change their habits and adhere more closely to the treatments. So I decided to study why there were people who would like to make a change in their lives because of their health or whatever, and yet they don't make those changes. It's like self-sabotage, it's like resistance to change. And those were the topics I chose. Again, this was a very motivating experience because it made sense for me, because it touched upon something that was important for me. So why doing research in the first place? You can have different motives. One reason could be that we have a question or a problem we want to tackle. It could well be that we are naturally curious. When we are children, we're hugely curious. That fades out, but we remain curious throughout adult life. And then critical thinking, questioning or challenging our gurus, our references. Perhaps the idea of chewing ideas before swallowing them. And then because of our ethics, that could be a reason to do research, our concern towards others. Are we helping others? Are we really helping? How do they feel when they work with us? Are we doing our best for their benefit? And we can have a reason to research because of our need to survive. I think the main motivation or the main driver for research is the need to survive. Our need to survive. Our survival as trainers in our institutes, in our clinical practice. When we feel threatened, we must find a way to survive. Even going to labs with mice. And it seemed only natural and understandable that survival could be an important reason to do research. But hopefully it is not only survival, not the only reason why we do research. Hopefully our research is not purely instrumental. Hopefully there is a desire. Maybe we aspire at solving a problem, maybe we are curious about challenging a theory, and it's not just about survival. A second point, to give you some context, has to do with what does it mean to do research in Gestalt and in experimental therapies? So I focused on different ways of administering Gestalt therapies. One has to do with researching into a gestaltic type of intervention. Here we could do exactly what they do in research on other therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy, any other model, and extrapolate that to a gestaltic intervention. There could be problems with that, but we could think about that line of research. And then, when we wonder about what it means to do research, perhaps researching on a concept, for example, what Daniela mentioned, the atmosphere, that is not only related to Gestalt, or for example, what we did in Chile, working on polarities, not purely Gestalt, but quite common in Latin America. So other ways of doing research, choosing concepts and focusing on them. And then another way of doing research in Gestalt is to focus on methodologies which are similar, which have an affinity. There is an interview called a macro-phenomenological interview, which is extremely similar to some therapeutic techniques that we use, and which is has an incredible affinity with our practices. So focusing on methodologies which are similar to ours, to do research on any phenomenon. It doesn't have to be something related to therapy. Now getting a little bit more in terms of advancements, challenges, opportunities in Gestalt research, I wanted to briefly share some advancements that I have noticed. To make myself clear, there is a weekend type of lecture that I deliver related to research in Gestalt in Santiago. I've been conducting these weekend lectures for 10 years. Before that, the lecture was not available. And I've noticed a rather significant differences, which is a reflection of something that is happening in many places. At first, we would have to spend a large proportion of our classes, of our lectures, to focus on the resistance of students, their concerns, their fears. So we had a number of activities to tackle that resistance. For example, the anxiety that would grow in them when thinking about research, the nightmares that would come to their minds, etc. In recent years, well, my material was ready to put together some activities, and it was irrelevant. It wasn't needed. I've seen a change. I've seen a predisposition which is much more positive. People are much more curious, they're much more willing, and they don't feel that much of a rejection from fear. Perhaps this is the biggest advancement we've seen, a change in attitudes towards research and what we can do with research. In terms of more specific advancements, there is a number of instruments that have been created. There is a number of research projects that have been completed. I've been involved in 2 of them. One is an instrument for the assessment of the integration of polarities, which is a process theoretically important for us in Chile. We didn't have a tool before that to capture that. Another one was a study, a meta-study on case studies of patients with anxiety. We've been gathering data, we've published some of the findings, and there's other studies out there, of course, some of them have been mentioned. So studies have been carried out, but I think that the biggest advancement has opened a door because it is a change in people's attitudes, in the predisposition that they have to open up to new things from curiosity. Another advancement, which I believe is rather relevant, is the fact that we have opened ourselves to other people that can collaborate with us. There's Greenberg for Elliot, who have been very kind to offer themselves as partners. They know a lot about research, and at the beginning, when they approached us, in the first instance, 40 years ago, they were rejected. Now they've come back, and we open our arms because we need them. I think that is also a positive change. Regarding difficulties and challenges, I wanted to mention some which may sound a little obvious and some which are not that obvious. A clear difficulty is that there's few of us in the academic world with knowledge about methodology, with resources to do research, to undertake research. So we are at a disadvantage compared to other colleagues in other specialties. They have many resources, they have a lot of know-how and methodologies, etc. And then perhaps our lack of interest or the lack of connection or political connection. What do I mean by that? Being in places of influence. At least in my home country, I've seen something like people are proud because they're not interested. Oh, I'm not there to think about power. I'm beyond that. But that is a difficulty if we want to generate change, if we want to survive as well. Another difficulty which I have noticed and which may be a little less obvious is a highly idealized vision or devalued vision of research. Idealized vision of research. Research has to do with doing something where there's no bias at all. Doing something where there is no doubt about what happened. Researching is about considering every single factor that may have played a role in the phenomenon. So we raise the bar so it goes so high that it's impossible to deliver. The people that do real research know that doing research is an extremely limited thing, is an exercise in humility, really. So we from outside are sometimes over-ambitious, and we over-idealize that, and that brings a huge barrier. It's like an Everest being between us and research. This is because of our lack of knowledge, because people that know about researching for real don't have those narcissistic or delusional attitudes. They know they will not find out as much. And then the devalued perception of research, in the sense that research is only figures, it is only labs, it is only focusing on stupid questions that may be quantified. As if we only had one type of research, as if research was something empty, which is there only to prove something that I already know. There's many types of research, and in general, people that criticize research heavily are thinking about research which is bad, it's poor. So good research for them is not representative. Another challenge, which is equally important, is something that was noticed by a psychoanalyst some 35 years ago. He was focusing on the problem of the PTO in English. Problem, treatment, outcome. What does that mean? And this is an important problem, a relevant problem for our research methods. Oftentimes, at least in Chile, there is a complete lack of connection, at least in our practice, between the way we operationalize the problem of our patient, whether we use DSM-5, whether we use different methodologies, what we want to do during treatment, for example, integrating polarities, and then how we assess the outcome of that treatment. For example, a symptom scale or a general well-being scale. There is a lack of connection, there is a gap between all those elements. Why is this relevant? When we have that lack of connection, we are at a disadvantage. If we want to survive, we need to prove that we are at least equivalent to so-called validated therapies. cognitive behavioral therapies do not have that problem of lack of consistency, because the outcome assessment methods were invented by the same people that designed the manual for treatment. So the treatment manual and the intervention are so closely aligned with the way to assess outcomes that everything goes in a very harmonious way forward. Sometimes we want to assess things that are different from those that are rated using a scale, and which can be equally important. For example, increasing the sense of vitality in our patient. If my scale doesn't take that into account, I will be working on something that will be invisible later on. And perhaps my patient doesn't mind, but if I want to research to survive, that would be a problem. And then, if I want to do research beyond surviving, perhaps because I have an ethical purpose in mind, we must have the ability to measure whether we are being able to help. And the scale, the standard scales that we use do not measure the things we want to work on. Therefore, we cannot respond to those questions because we don't have the right instruments. That doesn't imply creating instruments. We did create an instrument ourselves, but there are other instruments that allow us to measure well-being. For example, RIP scale on well-being. There's many instruments out there. They're already out there. No need to create them from scratch. I'm getting close to the end, and I was thinking about opportunities. The opportunities we have, what we can do. That was a question we got. What can we do when our survival is under threat? Well, I think we have a common need. There's many of us that either feel directly threatened or that are supportive, interested in contributing. Perhaps we might not feel threatened, but we would like to make a contribution. So there is a large group of people within our community that has an interest. A lot of people that is willing to do things. For example, our students in the different training modules. There is a human group there willing to help. There is an energy in the field. And that energy is a great opportunity that we should be able to harness. And the best way to harness that is by adding a little bit of a structure. The energy as it is, as Gianni was saying, if there is no channel, if there is no track for the energy overflows. We don't know what to do with it. It is shapeless. It becomes chaos. There's no synergies. Researching has to do with collaboration, and we have very few resources, and we have to take that into account. We cannot go at it alone. We need to collaborate with each other, and we need to collaborate from the different roles we play, from the different competences we have, not doing exactly the same, all of us. Someone with available time may make a contribution by making the work available. Someone who knows about a methodology could give advice to others. Someone leading a training program could collaborate with someone who knows about methodology in order to develop a methodology with their students, for example. And now, just to finish, I'm sorry, I think I went too long. Some more specific suggestions. For example, working as part of a network, joining existing research teams. If you want to do research, the best way to go is to join an existing research team. Another very specific suggestion is to try and do your best so that any research that has to do with assessing outcomes meets the criteria to be included in meta-analyses that are carried out more or less every 10 years. The help we got from Robert Elliott is invaluable. because he does that type of meta-analysis. What do you need in your research for it to be included in meta-analysis of the future? The final point, I wish the research process became more closely linked to the learning process, to show how certain types of research make a contribution towards the learning of our students, because students will do the bulk of that research. And since we have a very limited number of resources, that is a good way to go. For example, feedback-informed treatment methodologies. These are very useful for learning. They're useful to assess outcomes. Methodologies that look at change patterns, times of change, and which can be associated to mechanisms of change. What happened? What did I do right? What did I do wrong? What helped? What key factors during the therapy actually help the person reflect upon their own learning process? That's it from me. Thank you. Thank you. My apologies for being so long. Now, Christine.
Thank you, Pablo. There's an energy in the field. I liked what you said, Pablo. There's an energy in the field, and I feel an enormous energy and enthusiasm for research in Gestalt. And it's lovely that you're here. There's a lot of you here. There's more than I expected here. So I'm very thrilled that you're here with an interest in thinking with us about research in Gestalt. I'm here not as an academic. I'm an ordinary Gestalt therapist. And my passion is about how we can do research, all of us, as practitioners. And I was actually invited to be part of this panel because I'm the elected research liaison officer for the IAAGT. And I took over from someone called Mark Reck. Some of you might know him. And the IAAGT, in partnership with the EAGT and other national organisations, has co-sponsored and supported the Gestalt research conferences, which happen every 2 years, 3 years. And the last one was a year ago. I was delayed. It was a year ago in Hamburg in 2022. I thought it was important to tell you a little bit about the IAAGT, because people are sometimes confused about what the letters stand for. So this is a slide about the IAAGT. This is its full name. Well, it doesn't say the full name. The full name is the International Association for the Advancement of Gestalt Therapy. That's what the letters stand for. And until recently, because there's a big conference going on right now in Malta, but until recently, the EAGT and the IAAGT were the two major international Gestalt organizations holding big conferences, and we famously held one together a few years ago in Taormina, and some of you might have been there. But the IAGT is a very different organization from the EAGT. For a start, it's not a regulatory body. And it's quite important to understand this, because this makes a big difference to how it's structured and its function. And it's much smaller than the EAGT. It's only got 300, well, it's got 300 members as opposed to 2,000. And it's first and foremost an association. It's an experiment in applying Gestalt principles to community. Seems to me it would be really good to have some more liaison, more connection between these two organizations, because some of the challenges are quite similar. But it holds the concept of consensus very dear, and this means a lot of attention to process. Of course, it can sometimes feel very frustrating for people that want to get things done or want a clear decision on how to move forward on something. But what's really special about the organization is the attention to relationships. It's very distinctive, and we often stop and do this. And it can take a lot of time. So the IAAGT, because it's not a regulatory body, it includes all kinds of people. You just have to be a Gestalt enthusiast. So, in terms of how we're engaging with research, and I guess Rosanna and Rosanna is the chair of the EAGT Research Committee, I guess what we're doing is bringing to you some major thinking and developments right now of what we're thinking about internationally, of research in the Gestalt community. So, and I'm talking right now from the IAAGT perspective. So, in terms of how we're engaging, the achievements, challenges, and opportunities, I want to just briefly tell you about a couple of things. And because the IAGT is about the advancement, it's in its title, the advancement of Gestalt therapy, it's agreed that research is a core factor. It's one of the ways you advance Gestalt therapy. But while the IAGT is very supportive of research efforts up till now, as an organization, it hasn't put its efforts into a coherent, a collective project. However, we do now have, newly, a research action group, which is quite exciting. And it's a voluntary group with 20 members from North and South America, from Eastern and Western Europe, and it's begun to meet monthly. And it has a couple of tasks. One in particular I just want to mention is that because the next international conference organized by the AAGT is going to be next September, a year from now, in Mexico, in Veracruz in September, one of the ideas is how to bring an experience of being part of a live research project into the conference. So this group is thinking about how to do this. And one of the most important things in any research project is, what is the research question? So we're thinking about what is the research question that we would bring to that conference. And we haven't decided, we're having discussions, but one theme or one possibility is that we're interested, what is the experience of people attending the conference in person as opposed to that of people attending virtually? It's quite an interesting question. It's relevant for this conference. It's relevant for all our conferences, particularly in view of constraints and considerations for the planet. So that's watch this space. We haven't worked out how we would do it. We have to decide on the methodology. And what we're hoping is that by doing a piece of live research in an international conference, it will give everyone, or potentially everyone, the experience of participating in a piece of research that hopefully will be useful for us. You know, it would be useful to know that sometimes hybrid conferences don't work very well. We've got quite a lot to learn about that. We're also planning at that conference a panel where people will be able to pitch their research ideas. Not that they're all sorted out, but to sort of develop proposals that the participants could engage with. Could be like critical friends to give, to help think through what how to do research, what would be useful lines of inquiry. And we're hoping to have also a workshop on methodology, because there's quite a lot to learn in the community if we're going to become research competent as practitioners. Now, the other research development, which I want to briefly talk to you about, and we can discuss this in more detail. Rosanna's going to talk about this. But the IAGT are looking at this as well. Is this proposal for a practitioner case study research project? And this was an idea that I did present at the Hamburg conference, and I have also written about it. It's in the recent edition of the British Gestalt Journal and the German Gestalt Journal. And the point of this project is that it's inclusive, that anyone can be involved. But the aim is to build up a collection of published Gestalt case studies. Because amazingly, we don't have an evidence base for Gestalt therapy. And we could create that. We need to create this. We can publish this online, we can publish it in print, we can publish it in the Gestalt Therapy Research Database, which is available. We can publish it in psychotherapy journals, not just Gestalt journals. And the point about this project, which we hope we could discuss here, and Rosanna's going to talk more about this, is that it's inclusive. And as I said, anyone who's a Gestalt therapist can be involved. It's supportive, because you don't have to do it on your own. You do it in small groups with resources and mentoring provided. It's rigorous, because it isn't just a description of the work. The description is very important, and many of us are used to doing that. We've done it for our graduation, many of us. It's part of our training. But in addition, we're going to use simple measures. And Pablo was talking about measures, simple measures that don't affect adversely the therapist-client relationship, but measures that can help us talk with confidence about the work that can help us to look at outcome, for example, look at the process and have a way of describing the process. So there'll be training and access given to the protocols and the measurement tools, and a standard framework for writing up the case study. So it's a supportive framework, and this is what we're looking at and engaging with and planning. And so, although this is something that Rosanna is going to talk about with the EAGT, it's also something that we're looking at in the IAAGT. And it opens up the possibility of international collaboration, I mean truly international collaboration as practitioner researchers. Because we do need to develop a strong database, a strong evidence base for Gestalt therapy in order for it to advance, in order for it to thrive, in order for us to make our contribution in the world. And what I think I kind of want to say is that I think that it's lovely to be at a big conference like this with so many people present in person and online, but actually as a Gestalt community internationally, we're too small really to work in our own little groups and silos and to be cut off and hidden from each other. And what I would like to see, what my enthusiasm and energy is about, is for us to grow ourselves, to become more research savvy, to develop a solid evidence base for the practice of Gestalt, that we use our relational process-based know-how to forge partnerships of constructive collaboration for all our sakes. And the practitioner case study project is just one way that we can do this. Everyone can be involved. You don't need prior knowledge about research. You just need commitment to the process, an openness to discovery, the willingness to see it through, and the vision to work together to build an evidence base for the work that we love. Thank you.
Gracias, Christine.
Thank you, Christine. We're going to listen to Rosanna, the last presentation.
And thank you to be here. I'm very happy that it's the first time that in a EAGT conference there is a roundtable dedicated to research. And it was a purpose of the Hamburg conference, and now it's possible, and we are here. I want to say something about what we know about the situation in Europe now, about research. And as a research committee, we did two surveys. One was to Training Institute, and it was finished, and we have the data. And the other was to national organization that is ongoing, because only 8 national organizations answered, but I support other organizations to answer to this service. The situation that emerges from this service are that the Training Institute say that doing research is useful also for clinical practice. So research is not only an interest that is important for a researcher, but also it supports our practice. Another thing that Training Institute say that it's important to receive research during the basic training, because sometimes psychotherapists finish their training, but they are not able to do research. Even if they are interested, for example, to join to some project, research project, they are not educated, basically educated. For Training Institute, it's important to sharing tools, to sharing the result obtained in specific settings. And this is one of the points that also Pablo said, that it's important to create a network, to work together and to share what we achieve. And it's surprising data that the 59% of institutes are doing research. So research in Gestalt therapy is not so poor, but because 59 of institutes are doing research with their resources. Obviously, there are difficulties, and this is what we can use to do better in the future, because there is lack of human resources, there aren't a lot of researchers inside Training Institute that can lead the process to do research. there is insufficient financial resources. This is a problem for research all over the world, and so it's a problem also for Gestalt therapists. Again, there is lack of education in research for students. The Institute gives us some suggestions, and they suggest us to create a joint research project, to create a network of colleagues who do research, to have a list of journals open for publishing Gestalt research. We know that last year in Hamburg, Robert Elliott gave some suggestion for this, because some Gestalt, some research journals are more open to publish Gestalt research than others. And another problem is the entrance to database, for example, for doing a research literature. And the Institute want to be more informated about the result of the research project that have done. What emerges from the survey of the national organization that is ongoing? At the moment, the national organization that answered it say that one of the problems is that there are different regulations in different countries to become a psychotherapist. So, for example, in some countries, during the basic education, students receive research education. In other countries, not. There are different training. They feel that, and it's a problem, that there is a lack of scientific recognition for Gestalt therapy, and it is why we named the task force to support the recognition in these countries, decided to spread this survey. There aren't a research committee in each country. Sometimes in a national organization there are some working group, for example, a research committee in the national organization, sometimes no. And the majority of psychotherapists work in private practice, and so there is a problem to connection with the university. And this connection is possible only if there are some Gestalt professors that work inside the university. Suggestions from NOT are that we need to work together, so the network again emerges, and we share what has worked, to encourage national organizations to have a research committee, to be visible with also European Association of Psychotherapy, and to be united with other modalities, to participate to the international research project and international conferences, not only in Gestalt, international conferences on research, but also about other modalities, to have a constant information exchange. And national organization said, if you want to be supported with our government, we need to have a publication in scientific journal, because we can demonstrate that our modality is a good modality and can be recognized by the government. So, as a research committee, we have done something in this direction, and we are going to do more. The first thing as a research committee is that we supported other research projects that are not led by research committee, but that emerges from different committee inside the IGT. There is a research project of the Professional Competences Qualitative Standard Committee that it is ready to be published. They are preparing the article, and so the data are available. There is a Training Institute Chamber project with CORE that is starting now, and that involves all the institute of the Training Institute Chamber that want to join. As a research committee, we have elaborated also a document for different levels of teaching research in training. We are starting a series of webinar teaching research. So we want to support teachers that are in the program and that are teaching research. This webinar are recording and are available on the research database website. So if someone has not the possibility to attend online, can see the recording after. The next one is scheduled October 19. So take note of the date. We have already supported the birth of working groups, the delegitimation task force that spread this survey among national organizations. The single case time series working group that started some time ago, and now I think that has to increase its work. And the research task force that was born in Hamburg, that is an international working group which is working to the next Gestalt research conference. And in this group there are also persons that are not from Gestalt modality, and for example Robert Elliott, that is our mentor, is inside this working group. Other things that we already done, it was the creating of the Gestalt Research Network. That is a network where researchers can join and share their experience and to discuss research projects together. And also it was opened some year ago the Gestalt Psychotherapy Research Database. It's a work that is going on because there is a list of articles that are not inside the Gestalt Psychotherapy Research Database at the moment, but they will be uploaded. In this research database, there are videos from previous conference on research. There is the letter of support for Gestalt research that was seen last year in Hamburg. There are the recording on webinars teaching research. There are resources linked with research, and we want to create a new section that is oncoming dedicated to the project of single cases for practitioners. So, what we want to develop in the future? So, till now, our aim was to create the condition to be more involved in research and to create an actor and to create the possibility for the information that we have to be accessible to all. creating also the database and the network for research. But now it's a moment, the moment to do research, to be involved directly in research. We are working on creating a research ethic board that was voted 6 months ago in March and supported the research teams in countries where there is no access to local or national ethic board. And it is a board that can support the ethic approval of research, giving some suggestion and help, for example, to connect to ethic boards that are available to support the research that is starting. And another project is the practitioner case study research that I know now, today, that Christine has said that probably it will be possible that it will be not only an EIGT research project, but also an AEIGT, American Association. The practitioner case study research, the project, the aim of the project is to give the possibility to Gestalt therapists, all Gestalt therapists, not only researchers, to discuss and to meet together for discussing about their client and how they work with their client in the session. And another aim is to collect case studies on the research database. So it will be possible to create a review, I don't know, or some a reflection about all cases that we can collect. Okay. So all practitioners can take part to this project. Is not required prior knowledge, because during participating to this group, a practitioner can be educated about how to do research and how to conduct a case study. There is a project coordinator and a mentoring, and the group can be international, can be face-to-face or online. And it's the possibility that to create a group that speak the same language. So it's easier, for example, for people that don't speak English or don't understand an international language to join the group. So it was said before. And another aim is, it's an important aim, that the member of these groups try to do a publication of an article about the case study. So it's possible to publicate, and it's an aim of the project. Okay, there is some more details about the project. The timeline that we are open and are ready to start. So we will start preparing protocols, information, training materials, and we can work in recruiting from November to February and to forming this group, and then from the project we can discuss about how it's going, and the groups can continue, and there is a support for writing up and publication. So if you are interested in joining this project, you can write to research committee, and we will inform you when it will be the start. And I would like to thank all the members of the committee, because it's a group work, and Florence Balasco from France, Evgeny Kolesnikov, I hope to say right his name from Ukraine, Dmitry Nadirashvili from Georgia, and Margherita Spagnolo-Lob from Italy, Christine Stevens from United Kingdom, and I'm the chair of this group. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias a los tres por la presentación.
Thank you very much indeed for the We now have half an hour for Q&A. They've talked about quite a few things about the achievements, the opportunities, the challenges of what is happening on an international level, within the scope of what the European Association is doing. Here we have people from different countries. I guess you could share your experiences. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is the space we have put together for you to share and comment on anything you would like.
Hay preguntas por aquí.
Shall I start? My name is Elizabeth. I'm from Norway. I represent the Norwegian Gestalt Therapist Association. And what I miss, and thank you for your presentation, what I miss is a discussion on methodology of research. And for us, and I think for most of us in Gestalt therapists, there is a need to achieve recognition by the health authorities. So I'm a bit disappointed that you haven't discussed that. The methodology to be recognized. Our research is not recognized. They want, what is it called? Sorry. Systematic reviews, and on one module specifically. So it means in Norway we are struggling to get any recognition. Apart from we are allowed to practice, and almost half of us actually work within various public systems, health and social assistance. But we are still an unrecognized, invisible resource in times of increasing psychological problems, and yeah. So, and the research modules, one thing is the size of it, systematic reviews. Another thing is the evidence-based approach, which doesn't show what we're doing. We work relational, they focus on diagnosis. And this is what I really think that we need to collaborate on international level to achieve and to discuss how we have a dialogue with our authorities to recognize our type of work in order to use us as resources. Psychological health is a disaster and in big crisis in Norway, and I'm sure it is in most of the countries. Thank you.
Can we reply?
If you want to
start. Yeah. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. So you're right, we do need to develop. Sorry, I'll just put this off. It's better, I was having twice in my... We do need to develop... what's happening? But I haven't got a mic. Oh, how's that working?
You can talk.
Oh, sorry, I'm just not used to public speaking. Elizabeth, really good point. Yes, we do need to do the right sort of research. But the right sort of research, not the sort of research that changes what we do. This is the thing. So we need all kinds of research. The thinking behind the systematic case study we've been talking about is that it does meet evidence-based requirements. It's a mix of qualitative and quantitative measures, not only a description of the work by the therapist. So, for example, if we use the core outcome measure, we have, which is very simple to administer before you start therapy. When you finish therapy, you end up with a measurement. It's an internationally validated scale, and you end up with a measurement of whether the change is clinical and reliable. And you know, you may have seen, in the UK some years ago, we did a study of Gestalt practitioners with core to test it and to demonstrate in itself it provides an evidence base. So we can do this. This person here.
Yeah.
Buenas tardes ya aquí. Soy de México.
We have very poor sound. Okay, that's much better. I'm from Mexico. And the question goes to my colleague from Chile, Pablo. I am interested. We are interested in developing in Mexico. Research in Gestalt, as you mentioned earlier, and at least in Mexico, there seems to be the belief, as in other parts of the world, that Gestalt could be considered as a pseudoscience. And this part of the validation, for example, using outcomes, publishing outcomes in index journals, validated journals, sometimes is not that easy. For example, on 2 different occasions, I had to send contents to a couple of journals who have been registered, who were registered in Scopus, and they said, no, you cannot, you're not allowed to participate. This is something that is happening. CONACYT knows that this research is important. Research in Gestalt is important. I think it is important also to create those working groups, for example, for the whole of Latin America, setting up groups that reinforce the work carried out by researchers and opening up spaces where we can share the results, the findings of our work. The question would be, if there are working groups in Latin America doing research, that would be question number 1. And secondly, in what journals would we be allowed to publish with the certainty that the contents would be validated and published? Those would be the 2 questions. And not just for Pablo, for any members of the panel, since we have representatives in the UK as well, and Italy. That's a good question. In Latin America, as far as I know, we've been working out of Chile with a methodology that is really a combination of the case study methodology focused on time series. We have contents that have been published in certain different journals explaining the methodology. And then we have another type of methodology on building theories, not just focusing on outcomes, also focusing on exploring conceptual phenomena and how they are embodied in clinical cases. So we're working on those 2 methodologies in Chile as we speak. These are current projects. at Mexican University in Mexico. They're also focusing on this methodology. They're delivering training there. In other locations in Latin America, I couldn't tell you, but the project that our colleagues talked about is perfectly applicable to Mexico. This is a project which is simpler to carry out, but with a larger number of cases, it could be really powerful. The impact could be quite great. And since we have Robert Elliott helping us, that gives you hope in terms of the impact we could produce, because he is well within the world of research in the validation of therapy models, so he has an extensive knowledge about this. Where to publish? I would say that you would need a journal index in silo, Scopus. It depends on the study. There are case studies that are published in the best journals. There isn't an ex-ante type of limitation on where to publish and where not to publish. Regarding the quality of the journals, what you really need to do, that is essential, is associating, partnering with a group that knows about the methodology, which has published before you. Not doing it on your own, because it will be extremely difficult and it will not be helpful. So partnering with someone who has already published in those journals, who has that knowledge, and that can be a win-win situation, that partnership. There are people out there in universities who need to submit proposals for research projects, otherwise they will be kicked out of university. And they would be perfect potential partners for researchers. That would be an extremely interesting partnership. And with people from the SBR, the Society for Research in Psychotherapy, we have an open environment collaborating greatly.
Something about what Pablo said. I think that it's possible also to create a research project research that are led in 2 different countries. For example, I have published with a colleague a single case time series research project in collaboration with a Mexican colleague, and the research will be led in Mexico and contemporary in Italy. So, and it is the same project, the same measurement. It is to old people, depression in Alzheimer's disease or other dementia. And is a research that we have the same measurement that are validated in Mexico and validated in Italy. It's possible to do also this. We have to create a network and to work together.
Sí. No. Ahora parece.
Hello, my name is Diego from the Canary Islands in Spain. First of all, I would like to thank you for the energy you have brought with you. It's an energy of humility, low profile energy, but necessary type of energy. So thank you for your involvement, for your dedication. There's a few questions from me. One, is there any country out there where this methodology, where the regulation is leading the way? On the other hand, I have another question about your view on applying sort of a camouflage to Gestalt research. Let me explain that. When you were talking about polarities, when I talk to colleagues who are not Gestalt practitioners, the terminology itself sometimes leads to a certain type of rejection. We talk about perfectly ordinary things. We're looking at a Gaussian distribution, looking at the way the factors are distributed. We are talking about the same thing, perhaps, but we're using a different language. I would like to know about your view on that. How about when submitting papers to journals, adapting the language we use so that we have more common ground with other people in terms of the way we describe things? For example, if you're describing an experiment in a non-aggressive, an experiment which is non-aggressive, which can have a positive impact on a patient with complex dissociation disorder. Obviously, that would imply moving a little far away from our jargon in Gestalt practice. How about opening ourselves up to using a terminology which is easier to understand for our environment, which doesn't yet know about Gestalt theory in depth? Thank you.
De la primera pregunta.
For the first question, there are many examples of different places in the world, but the important thing is that they must be examples that are close to us, because contacting with something that with whom I have no relationship and he's on the other side of the world is possible, it's very difficult to have a real collaboration. So I would recommend contacting people which is closer to you, like for example here, for example, the project presented by our colleagues, or the other project of case studies with temporary series, which is more complex. So contacting someone who has the knowledge and the skills, but is not so far away. Don't you think about worldwide. Think about who's closer to you, because there you can have a more probable collaboration. On the other side, and happily, there's quite an openness about the models that can be published. In international first-level journals, there are many publications of many therapies that have got Gestalt references, so there is no limits a priori there. So I would say that when you present the concepts, or when concepts are presented, they must be related to other concepts that are of outside, so that it's not just enclosed in an isolated language. And for that, you have to open yourself to other theories, make relations, and present that more explicitly. That will be the only thing. It is like, this is similar to this other thing, and this is, but this different. So making that effort of dialoguing, and that will be easier for the others to understand us. Hello? Bye?
There are two. There is another person that has the microphone. Okay.
No.
Dimitri.
Hello.
Dimitri, there's someone here speaking. You're next.
No, it was the first.
Bueno, tras que me cuesta...
Okay. When I was trained, I was taught about methodology, statistics, and they taught me that we had to have a control group. Each time that I've thought about any project to research, I've asked myself, is this necessary, and how can I get it? Because the results is what provide weight. Let me try and explain better. If we review a concept, it might be interesting for the community. But if we see results, that's what commands results. If I use Gestalt therapy or something else, the result is what counts. In that sense, how can I set up a control group? How do you do that in therapy? And even less, how do I contact? I have no difficulties for the language. And there I find similarities. But how can I establish control groups? And if this is necessary, this would be the first question. And the second question is, what kind of tests can be useful and valid inside the community, scientific community I mean, so that the results can be validated? So what are the chosen ones or the most adequate ones? Do you get my question?
First one, you pass it over to my colleague. So thank you for your question. It's an important question about, do you need to have control groups? Well, it depends on what methodology you're using. So if you're using a random controlled trial, like, for example, which are used for testing, for example, medicines, then it's common to use a control group. You can set up a control group in psychotherapy, but you really need to be doing that probably from a university or a very big clinic, because you need resources. It's quite expensive to do that kind of research. It's very interesting, it's very useful research, but unless you are working in collaboration with a bigger institution, it's not very practical for us as practitioners. So if we're practitioners, there are other methodologies, like, for example, the one we've been describing, the practitioner case study, systematic case study. That is a methodology that practitioners can use. You don't need a control group for that, because it's a different kind of methodology. So there are many different kinds of methodologies, and they deal with different kinds of knowledge. And we actually need all kinds of research, but on your own, it's difficult to do a Gestalt therapy research with a control group. You do a different kind of study. But, you know, if you've got access to resources, then it would be great to do that kind of research. But it's not the only kind of research.
With regards to the second question, some tools validated in your country, I don't know, or Q45, core, there are different instruments that validate. But if someone is asking herself such a question of what methodology do I use, how do I follow this methodology, you have to change the question around. The only way to respond is by learning a lot about research methodology on psychotherapy, and for that you need to do a PhD. So that's a bad question as a starting point, because the challenge is huge. So I would rather say that if you're asking yourself that question, join yourself, find someone who has already been able to answer to that question. You don't need to answer that. It's too difficult to respond if you already have other challenges in his existence, who has got a life. If you're asking yourself that question, either you know how to reply because you have done that, because you've been devoted to that, or don't ask that question to yourself and find someone who has answered it. That requires a lot of years, not only because it's so difficult to do, but it requires a lot of time dedication. Those people have got other priorities rather than learning from randomized trials.
Hello, Pablo, Christine, Rosanna. It's, I think, very useful situation when we are talking on Gestalt therapy conference about research. And I have also a question to you and your vision. We see persons in how many institutes is education in 49% is not education about research. And there is some stereotypes that I meet with Gestalt therapists, that they don't need research in such way as is in other directions or psychology. And I think it's important to diagnose this. Why is such stereotype in Gestalt therapy field in Gestalt therapists? It's one. And the second, my question, what kind of obstacle for your vision we have, Gestalt therapists, to publish and do researches in Gestalt therapy? Because it's also important to know what kind of obstacles is in our sphere. Because without overcome this, it's impossible to be such Gestalt therapy or direction as, for instance, the CBT or psychoanalysis. Thank you.
He was asking me or not?
I don't know.
You mentioned your region. Were you asking all of us or a specific one? Oh, okay. Okay. Ya, respecto de los estereotipos.
For stereotypes? That would be a good research to get to know which are the stereotypes, how they were created. But some comments, I've already mentioned them, of these idolized or devalued view of research as something incredibly ambitious, demanding, or something absurd that doesn't take care about what's important. So I found many of these views in my colleagues, students, in myself too, until I started doing research. And I think that it's part of those stereotypes. For the other question, well, there's a lot of people who try to publish, but they don't have specific knowledge about how to publish. And this is very different on knowledge of how to learn cases, how to write well, how to be with patients. So this is different knowledge. You might be very intelligent and write well and be very analytical, but there are details of how you must publish that they don't know. And they're not difficult to learn, but you need to know them, because you don't know them a priori if you haven't published before. So it's necessary to connect and to have the support of people who have already done research and has published, and that has shortcuts, practical advice. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult and very frustrating to publish. So we're not used to doing that in LATAM, at least. The research paper format is totally alien to us, because we don't see it in school, at college. We never publish in that format, never. So it's like speaking a fully different language for us. So we always write essays, but that's a difficulty, because when publishing, you have to write something different. And we don't know how to structure, we don't know what journals, what index. It's a new language that you have to learn. That's what I could say. We have time for one more question. Someone had raised the hand, and that's going to be it, because we are on time.
There was another question. There's two people that didn't have a chance to speak. If you still want to say something quickly. Thank you very much. I think you basically answered my question already. I would agree. I can relate 100% to what you said, Pablo. That bridge, we're talking about connecting with each other. There's so many incredible things that we are developing, that we are doing, and how to translate all of that into the language of research. You already touched upon many of those things. It's like building a bridge between us in the therapy room and the space of research. Using the resources that are out there, using networks. There are very good therapists out there that may have developed very interesting methods. There could be theorists who know a lot about what they're doing. Others know a lot about research. We need to complement our gifts and talents, so to say, through the internet, through direct contact with someone that can complement my own knowledge, something I'm lacking. Thank you very much for your presence. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for fostering research. Moving forward 100%. I think we're doing quite a few things in Spain and doing our best. An example of this panel, the association has been behind this for quite some time, so we'll keep moving forward. Thank you very much indeed.